My beloved child. Pause here. Do not let your hand move past this moment, because something hidden has finally reached the surface, and what you are about to hear was not meant to arrive 1 second earlier. There is a heart connected to yours that has been carrying a painful misunderstanding in silence. For longer than you realize, your soulmate believed something that wounded them deeply. They thought your love had faded. They thought the tenderness between you had become only a memory. They thought the distance meant you had quietly chosen to let them go. But they were completely wrong. Something happened recently that shattered that belief. A truth reached them in a way they could no longer ignore. It did not come through a dramatic confession. It did not arrive with thunder, spectacle, or a perfect explanation. It came through one small detail, something so subtle that another person might have overlooked it completely. Yet when your soulmate noticed it, their entire emotional world became still. In that single moment, they realized that what they had interpreted as the ending of your love may have been something else entirely. They began to understand that your silence was not emptiness. Your distance was not rejection. Your guarded heart was not proof that you had stopped caring. And now, they cannot stop replaying everything. They are revisiting old conversations, unfinished moments, pauses between words, and the look in your eyes that they once misunderstood. They are remembering every time you almost said something but pulled back. Every time you appeared strong while something inside you was trembling. Every time you chose patience instead of pressure, and every time you disappeared into silence because your heart had become too full to speak safely. They believed you had stopped loving them. But now they are beginning to see that perhaps you loved them so deeply that you had to protect yourself from the weight of it. Stay with this message, because the reason they misunderstood you is not what you think. There was a moment when your soulmate expected you to fight harder for the connection. They expected you to chase, demand answers, or prove your feelings in the way they had imagined love should be proven. When you did not respond that way, they took your stillness personally. They told themselves that someone who truly cared would have reached out differently. They believed that if your love remained, you would have crossed every barrier without hesitation. But what they could not see was the battle already taking place inside you. You were trying to understand whether reaching for them would heal the connection or disturb it further. You were trying to respect boundaries that had never been clearly explained. You were trying not to become another source of pressure in a life that already felt heavy to them. You were holding back words that could have changed everything because you feared they might arrive at the wrong time and be misunderstood again. You did not stop loving them. You stopped forcing what your heart wanted to protect. Heaven saw this. Every restrained message. Every night you wanted to speak their name. Every moment you reached for your phone and then placed it down. Every time you prayed for their peace even while your own heart felt unanswered. None of it was invisible. None of it was wasted. The love you carried in silence created an imprint, and that imprint has now begun to reveal itself. Your soulmate has felt it. At first, they could not explain the sudden heaviness in their chest. They thought it was nostalgia. They thought perhaps they were simply missing the person you used to be together. But the feeling did not pass. It grew stronger. It followed them into quiet rooms. It interrupted ordinary moments. It appeared when they were surrounded by other people and should have been distracted. Then came the memory. Not the obvious memory they usually return to, but one they had buried because it made them feel too vulnerable. They remembered a moment when you looked at them with an expression they did not fully understand at the time. You were trying to hide how much you cared. You were trying to remain composed, but your eyes revealed what your voice would not say. They saw that memory differently now. And for the first time, they asked themselves, what if I was wrong? That question opened a door they had kept locked. Once it opened, everything began rushing through. What if your quietness was not indifference? What if your absence was not a lack of love? What if you had been waiting for a sign from them just as they had been waiting for one from you? What if both of you had been standing on opposite sides of the same emotional doorway, each believing the other had already walked away? This realization shook them. Because it meant the pain they had been carrying was built partly upon assumption. It meant they may have judged your heart while never fully understanding your wounds. It meant they had allowed fear to narrate your intentions. And fear is persuasive, my child. Fear can take a delayed reply and call it rejection. It can take emotional caution and call it coldness. It can take a wounded person's silence and call it proof that love is gone. Your soulmate listened to that fear for too long. But something has changed now. Their heart is no longer accepting the old story. They are beginning to notice patterns that contradict everything they once believed. They remember the way you continued to care even when you had nothing to gain. They remember how you protected their name in conversations where you could have exposed their mistakes. They remember how you never truly replaced them in your heart, even when you tried to convince yourself that you should move forward. There are things they have recently heard about you as well. Words spoken by someone who observed more than either of you realized. This person did not reveal everything, but they mentioned something that made your soulmate go silent. They said you had not spoken badly about the connection. They said that even after the confusion, you still carried respect. They said there were moments when your face changed at the mention of your soulmate's name, not with anger, but with a sadness that looked too much like love. Your soulmate was not prepared to hear that. They had created a version of you who had moved on easily. A version who had forgotten. A version who no longer cared enough to look back. That version helped them survive the distance because it gave them permission to become distant too. It allowed them to believe there was nothing left to recover. But now that illusion is breaking. And beneath it is a truth far more emotional than they expected. You were hurting too. Not in the same way, perhaps. Not with the same outward signs. But you carried your own unanswered questions. You wondered why they did not see the love hidden beneath your restraint. You wondered whether they ever understood how much courage it took for you not to react from pain. You wondered whether your calmness had become the very thing that convinced them you felt nothing. The answer is yes. For a time, they mistook your strength for emotional absence. They did not realize that some hearts cry without making a sound. They did not understand that you had learned to hide pain because life taught you that visible vulnerability was not always safe. They thought your ability to continue meant you had healed quickly. They thought your quietness meant you had forgotten. But the truth is that you carried them into places they never saw. Into prayers. Into dreams. Into moments of reflection. Into decisions about the kind of person you wanted to become. You did not always know whether the connection would return, yet part of you continued preparing for a love that could survive honesty. You began healing patterns that once made closeness difficult. You started questioning your own fears, your own defenses, and your own habit of retreating when emotions became too intense. Even while your soulmate believed you no longer loved them, your soul was learning how to love more truthfully. This is one of the reasons the separation felt so confusing. It was not empty time. It was transformation. Both of you were being shown the parts of yourselves that could not remain unchanged if the connection was ever to become healthier. Your soulmate was being confronted with their fear of abandonment, their tendency to assume the worst, and their habit of waiting for certainty before offering vulnerability. You were being confronted with your fear of being misunderstood, your tendency to protect love through silence, and the way you sometimes expected another person to recognize feelings you had never clearly expressed. Neither of you was being punished. You were being prepared. But preparation rarely feels beautiful while it is happening. It often feels like delay. It feels like confusion. It feels like losing something that once seemed destined to remain. Yet heaven does not reveal the full meaning of every season at the beginning. Some truths can only be understood after the heart has become humble enough to receive them. Your soulmate is reaching that humility now. They have begun admitting things to themselves they once avoided. They miss you more than they allowed themselves to say. They have compared other connections to the depth they felt with you. They have searched for your presence in unfamiliar faces and found only reminders of what cannot be easily replaced. They have imagined conversations with you, not because they are living in fantasy, but because there are words inside them that have nowhere else to go. And one sentence has risen above all the others. I thought you stopped loving me. They have said it silently. They have felt it while remembering you. They may even have whispered it when no one was near enough to hear. But the sentence does not end there anymore. Now another sentence follows. I was completely wrong. Those words frighten them because they create responsibility. It is easier to believe someone stopped loving you than to admit you may have misread their love. It is easier to protect pride than to reopen a conversation that could expose regret. It is easier to call something finished than to ask whether your own fear helped close the door. Your soulmate is standing in that uncomfortable truth now. They know that realizing they were wrong is only the beginning. Soon, they will have to decide what to do with that realization. Will they remain silent and hope the feeling passes? Will they continue observing from a distance, looking for more proof? Will they wait for you to move first? Or will they finally become brave enough to speak the words they have been avoiding? This is where the energy has become intense. Because their heart wants movement, but their mind is still afraid. Their heart says, reach out before it is too late. Their mind says, what if the love is still there, but the door is no longer open? Their heart says, tell the truth. Their mind says, what if the truth is not enough? Their heart says, you misunderstood them. Their mind says, what if they no longer believe you deserve another chance? This inner conflict has made them restless. They have been searching for a sign that you would not reject the sincerity they are finally ready to show. They are not looking for perfection. They are looking for permission. A small indication that the emotional bridge between you has not completely collapsed. But there is something they do not know. You have been waiting for truth, not performance. You do not need them to arrive with flawless words. You do not need a dramatic gesture designed to erase everything in one moment. What your heart has longed for is honesty. You have wanted them to acknowledge what happened without hiding behind confusion. You have wanted them to see that your love was real even when it did not look the way they expected. And now they are beginning to see it. But the deepest revelation has not yet reached them. There is a specific moment from the past that they are about to remember, and when they do, it will change the meaning of your entire silence. You may already know which moment this is. It was a moment when you could have walked away completely, but you chose not to. Perhaps you offered kindness when you were hurt. Perhaps you protected them when no one would have blamed you for turning cold. Perhaps you left a door open in a way so subtle that they failed to recognize it. At the time, they dismissed it. They told themselves you were simply being polite. They convinced themselves your compassion meant nothing deeper. But soon they will understand that people do not protect what they have truly stopped caring about. That realization will bring tears. Not only because they will recognize your love, but because they will recognize the pain you carried while giving it. They will begin to see the cost of your patience. They will understand that your silence was never effortless. It required you to swallow questions, resist impulses, and live with uncertainty. You allowed them space even when every part of you wanted clarity. You honored what they seemed to need, even while wondering whether that space would become permanent. They thought you had stopped loving them. In truth, you were loving them without knowing whether they would ever return to understand it. That truth is reaching them now. And once it fully enters their heart, they will not be able to remain the same. There will be regret, yes, but this message is not arriving to trap either of you in regret. Regret is only useful when it becomes wisdom. The purpose of this revelation is not to make your soulmate suffer. It is to awaken them. It is to bring them to the point where they can no longer hide from the depth of the connection or from the role their fear played in delaying honesty. You, too, are being asked to understand something. Their misunderstanding was not proof that your love failed. Sometimes love is real, yet communication is incomplete. Sometimes two people care deeply and still misinterpret one another because old wounds speak louder than present truth. Sometimes the connection is not lost, it is buried beneath assumptions that must be uncovered one by one. This does not mean you should accept confusion forever. It does not mean you should ignore your own boundaries or return to patterns that once hurt you. It means you are being invited to see the situation with clearer eyes. You can acknowledge the love without surrendering your wisdom. You can remain open without abandoning self-respect. You can forgive misunderstanding without pretending it caused no pain. The next chapter, if it opens, must be different. It cannot be built on hints alone. It cannot survive through guessing. It cannot depend on one person always understanding what the other is too afraid to say. Your soulmate is beginning to know this. They realize that if they come toward you, they must come honestly. They cannot hide behind vague messages or half-hearted gestures. They cannot test your feelings while concealing their own. They cannot expect you to carry the entire emotional risk. Something within them is preparing to become direct. This is why you may have felt sudden emotional waves lately. A memory may have returned without warning. Their name may have entered your thoughts during an ordinary moment. You may have dreamed of a conversation that felt unusually vivid. These experiences do not guarantee a particular outcome, but within this story, they symbolize the emotional cord between two people who are finally approaching the truth from opposite directions. Your soul has been sensing movement. Not necessarily visible movement yet. Inner movement. The kind that comes before a decision. The kind that causes a person to reread old messages, revisit old places, and question the story they have been telling themselves. Your soulmate has been doing this. They have looked at something connected to you more than once. Perhaps a photograph, a message, a song, or an object with meaning. The first time, they felt longing. The second time, they felt guilt. But the third time, something shifted. They noticed evidence of your love that had always been there. A phrase you used. A promise you quietly kept. A detail you remembered when others would have forgotten. And suddenly, their heart could no longer defend the belief that you had stopped caring. That was the moment everything changed. But there is more. After this realization, they tried to distract themselves. They told themselves it was only emotion. They attempted to return to routine. Yet the truth followed them. It became stronger in silence. It appeared in the spaces between tasks. It pressed against the walls they had built. Then, unexpectedly, someone asked them a question about you. It was not a complicated question. It may have been as simple as, "Do you still care?" Your soulmate did not answer immediately. That hesitation revealed more than words could have. The person watching them noticed the change in their expression. They noticed the way your soulmate looked away. They noticed the emotion that rose before it could be hidden. And then your soulmate finally said something. Not everything. Not yet. But enough to reveal that the connection still holds power over their heart. They admitted they may have been wrong about you. They admitted they had assumed your silence meant your love was gone. And then, in a voice quieter than expected, they said, "What if they were waiting for me to understand?" That question has not left them. It has become the center of their thoughts. Because deep down, they know the answer. Yes, a part of you was waiting. Not waiting without living. Not waiting without growing. But waiting for the truth to become visible. Waiting for them to see that love cannot always be measured by pursuit. Waiting for them to understand that sometimes the person who steps back is not the one who cares less, but the one who can no longer keep proving their heart to someone committed to misunderstanding it. Your soulmate now recognizes that you grew tired. Not tired of loving them. Tired of feeling unseen. That distinction has pierced them. They are beginning to understand that you did not need grand promises. You needed emotional recognition. You needed them to notice how much you were carrying. You needed them to meet your honesty with honesty rather than suspicion. They wish they had seen it sooner. They wish they had asked instead of assuming. They wish they had listened to your heart rather than to the fear inside their own. But wishing cannot change the past. Only courage can change what happens next. And courage is forming. Slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. Your soulmate has begun preparing words. They may not have written them down, but they have spoken them in their mind. They have imagined how they would begin. They have considered whether to apologize first or confess first. They have wondered whether to tell you how deeply the misunderstanding affected them. Yet there is one thing they have not decided. Whether to reveal the event that finally proved your love had never disappeared. Because something was shown to them. Something connected to you. Something they were never supposed to see. It may have been a message you wrote but never sent. It may have been a truth shared by someone who knew what you had endured. It may have been evidence of a quiet act of love you performed without expecting recognition. Whatever form it took, it changed them. It made them realize that even in your most distant season, you had still been protecting something sacred between you. They now know that you loved them beyond what they deserved in that moment. And this knowledge has created a new fear. Not the fear that you stopped loving them. The fear that they recognized your love too late. Listen carefully, because this is where the message turns. Your soulmate is not only questioning whether you still love them. They are questioning whether they still have the right to ask. They know love cannot be demanded simply because it survived. They know your heart may still carry warmth while also carrying boundaries. They know that finding out they were wrong does not automatically erase the consequences of their distance. This is why their next move matters. They are standing at the edge of a choice that could reshape everything. One path allows fear to win again. On that path, they remain silent, watch from a distance, and spend years wondering what might have happened if they had spoken. The other path requires humility. On that path, they come forward without guarantees. They admit the truth. They tell you, "I thought you stopped loving me, and I built my decisions around that belief. But now I see that I was wrong." They have not chosen yet. But a moment is approaching that will force the decision. A moment connected to your name. A moment that will make silence feel more painful than honesty. And when that moment arrives, they will discover something else, something even more powerful than the realization that your love never fully disappeared. They will discover why heaven allowed them to misunderstand you for this long. They will discover what had to change inside both of you before the truth could safely return. And they will learn that the small detail that opened their eyes was only the beginning. Because the final evidence of your love, the one thing that will leave them unable to deny the connection any longer, has not yet been revealed. But it is about to be.